The supply of fuel oil to ships is known as bunkering. A critical issue for every bunkering operation is to ensure that you do not cause accidental fuel oil spills. Not only do fuel oil spills severely impact the marine environment, including ecosystems for aquatic life and seabirds, but they may also affect our human living environment. Therefore, we should pay utmost attention to preventing accidental fuel oil spills. Most accidental oil spills occur during bunkering operations. Some can be blamed on mechanical failure, such as hose connections between the bunker, barge and ship that may break during rolling or pitching when a vessel passes in the vicinity. But the most frequent causes are human errors, such as an inadequate bunkering plan, simple mistakes, a lack of knowledge of bunkering best practices, communication barriers and incorrect tank sounding. The purpose of bunkering is to safely deliver to the vessel fuel oils of specific types and characteristics and in agreed quantities within a designated period of time. Most bunker suppliers are scrupulous, but some are not. In cases of short quantity bunkers or deliberate undersupply of fuel have been known to occur. As with the case of oil spill prevention, proper measures such as monitoring of bunkering operations should always be taken. All ships must maintain the capability to respond immediately to an oil spill accompanied by fire. The purpose of this DVD is divided into two parts: to explain the fundamental procedures for ensuring the delivery of fuel oils of the required quality and quantity, and to ensure that bunkering operations are safely accomplished without causing environmental pollution due to an oil spill and/or fire. Establishing a proper bunkering plan is the first step in any program to prevent accidental oil spills. The chief engineer should prepare an appropriate plan and conduct a pre-bunkering meeting and familiarization among staff before the ship arrives at the point of bunkering. A good bunkering plan will identify each step of the operation, give each team member specific assignments, and will note tank conditions prior to bunkering, bunker volumes to be supplied, allowable bunkering flow, and predicted tank conditions after bunkering. All information should be clear and easy to understand. The plan, which should be kept on board, will be signed by the master and chief engineer. After an on-board meeting is held based on this plan, bunkering assignments will be confirmed among team members. Always try to avoid the mixing of different types of fuel oil to prevent incompatibilities that may create sludge which can block or damage machinery and equipment. Even when the bunkering port is the same, fuel oils may differ because they were delivered on different dates, from different lots or from different barges. Depending on circumstances, you may have to consider tank-to-tank transfer operation of residual oils. If mixing of bunker fuel with residual oil cannot be avoided due to capacity availability, try to minimize the ratio of residual oil. In general, plan to avoid mixing fuel and residual oil. To prevent tank overflow, always make sure that the maximum quantity of bunker fuel received by each tank does not exceed its capacity limit. IMO MARPOL 7378 Annex 6 and EU Directive 2005/33/EC emission control regulations limit the sulfur content of fuel oils. As a rule, ships must only use fuel oils that conform to international regulations. Other regulations include those of the State of California Air Resources Board. You must also be aware of current regulations applicable to territorial waters of certain countries, which may be modified from time to time. Now let's look at the preparations to be taken before bunkering operations begin. First, conduct a line pressure test. Confirm that all valves connected to manifolds, piping and tanks are fully operational. The person in charge must ensure that valve alignment is correctly prepared. For the sake of good communication, make sure that all team members at the bunker station, bunker manifolds and bunkering quarters have access to transceivers or inboard phones. If communications equipment is not sufficient or cannot be used, all team members must know how to use hand signals and whistles properly. Here are some examples of hand signals. Confirm that each target tank's air vent is open. Confirm that all scuppers are closed. Close the bunkering station's drain plug. Hoist a B flag or other appropriate warning signal or a red light on the mast at night time. Prepare a sounding tape. Also prepare a tank table. Attach sampling equipment to the ship's manifold to prepare for sampling. Place empty drip trays underneath hose connections. Also attach a pressure gauge and thermometer to the bunker manifold. Prepare oil pollution prevention materials stipulated in SOPEP, Shipboard Oil Pollution Emergency Plan, nearby the bunker station, such as oil spill treatment agents and treatment agent sprays. Waste cloths. Sawdust. Oil absorbents. And any other tools and equipment deemed necessary. Collect oil-contaminated waste cloths and sawdust and store them in drums. Never dump them into the sea. Please take the following precautions when the barge comes alongside. On the barge side, where necessary, the barge crew can deploy an oil fence around the barge to prevent spilled oil from spreading into surrounding waters. The ship's crew now conducts manual sounding of the receiving tanks and all other bunker storage tanks. The fuel transfer pump should not be in use during bunkering operations. Once the barge has come alongside the ship, the chief engineer and the barge's representative have a meeting to confirm operational safety, as well as BDN entries such as the oil types, quantities and characteristics. Then the ship's representative will go to the barge. To prevent short quantity bunkers, the ship's representative should supervise sounding of the barge tanks before and after bunkering. Direct supervision is essential to ensure that the designated quantity of bunker fuel is supplied. Confirm that the sounding tapes to be used function properly. If they are illegible, kinked or spliced, use the ship's sounding tapes. Conduct sounding several times and take the mean value as the measurement value. Remember to record the barge draft, trim and list. Take temperature measurements of all bunker fuel tanks at the intermediate level of the barge tanks. Confirm that the barge tank table is a version duly authorized by a public organization. Even if the measured figure is 0 centimeters, confirm the quantity in the bunker tank with the barge's tank table. Zero sounding may not be zero volume in the tank. Residual volume may be substantial for multiple tank deliveries. Connect the barge hose to the ship's receiving pipe. Attach the primary sample cubitainer to the sampling equipment in the presence of representatives from both the supplier and the ship. Finally, attach a tag to the cubitainer, then seal it. When crew members are on standby and the chief engineer has confirmed that all preparations have been completed, the chief engineer or an engineer appointed by him alerts the barge to commence transfer at a minimum rate. Confirm that no oil is leaking from the related piping, including hose connections and valves. Confirm that oil is being supplied to the target tank and that there is no change in sounding values of non-bunkered tanks. Confirm that air is flowing out of the air vent. During the bunkering operation, always remember to maintain close communication between the control room and the operation site. Also remember to post a watchman at the bunkering manifold. Never leave the bunker manifold and sounding pipes unattended. If there is no problem, raise the oil transfer rate to the prescribed rate. Keep watch on bunkering operations at all times, including on the opposite side of the bunkering station. Start continuous drip sampling. Use a flow control valve to regulate dripping. Then seal the valve to prevent its manipulation throughout the bunker delivery process. When readjustment of dripping is necessary, unseal the valve in the presence of representatives from both the supplier and the ship. After readjustment is completed, affix a new seal to the valve. Take the following steps when switching from one receiving tank to another during the bunkering process. First, lower the bunker oil transfer rate after informing the barge to that effect. Fully open the intake valve of the tank to be switched to. Confirm that air is flowing out of the air vent. Fully close the valve of the tank that has been filled with the prescribed quantity of bunker fuel. After switching, conduct sounding of all the tanks as the occasion may require. Upon completion of switching, notify the barge to raise the transfer rate gradually to the prescribed rate. Conduct all tank manual sounding at regular intervals as stipulated in the bunkering plan. Note that marine diesel oil, MDO, and marine gas oil, MGO, are less viscous, and therefore pitching and rolling of the vessel will lead to false level readings. When sounding these types of fuel, do so when the ship is in calm seas. When it comes to MDO and MGO, sounding is the appropriate process for measuring bunker levels. In this method, a weighted tape is lowered into the sounding pipe, attached to each bunker tank until the weight reaches the tank's bottom. To ensure accurate sounding, the height between the upper end of the sounding pipe and the tank bottom is clearly marked around the pipe. The so-called ullage measurement is used for the sounding of the more viscous heavy fuel oil, HFO, which is known to contaminate both the pipe and the gauge. Under this method, the tape is lowered until its tip touches the surface of the oil in the tank. The measurement is then made through reverse calculation. Lower the gauge into the sounding pipe until the oil adheres to the weight at the gauge tip. Ullage is obtained by subtracting the length of oil that is adhered to it from the total length of the lowered gauge. The oil level can be calculated by subtracting the ullage from the total height between the pipe's upper end and the tank bottom. If the vessel is in trim or heel during sounding, use a publicly authorized correction table to get the actual sounding value, which is then used to calculate net oil volume. Lower the oil transfer rate to minimum, then close the sampling equipment's flow control valve immediately before the last tank tops off. Before conducting line air blowing, confirm that all sounding pipe caps are closed. Also confirm that sufficient space is left in the air blow target tank. Conduct line air blowing using compressed air. After oil surface fluctuations due to air blow have subsided, sound all the tanks for a final check of the total quantity of bunker fuels delivered. Calculate the total quantity of bunker fuel received using the trim heel correction table, tank table and temperature conversion table. Compare the quantity on the BDN with the received quantity as calculated by the ship. Both the ship and supplier sides sign the BDN only after confirming that there is no discrepancy. Should there be any discrepancy in quantity between the ship and the barge, the ship should issue a letter of protest to the bunker supplier to prevent a dispute in the future and enter the quantity actually received into the BDN. Even when BDN entry of the actual received quantity has been rejected by the supplier, the ship should prepare a letter of protest to that effect and sign the BDN with a remark. The ship management company will indicate the proper addressee for the letter of protest, a copy of which the master will keep on board. The bunkering hose will be disconnected after obtaining prescribed documents, such as the BDN and materials safety datasheet. However, do not remove the drip tray from underneath the hose connection until the hose is disconnected. Beware of oil scattering when disconnecting the hose under a gale. Disconnect the hose. Return all line and valve operation from bunkering mode to normal and set the transfer pump back to auto. Keep a record of the bunkering operations in the oil record book and logbook. Details include place of bunkering, date and time, types and quantities of bunker fuels received, and tank number. Also enter the information into the MARPOL sample history and keep it. Fuel oil sampling is critically important. Firstly, because it concerns compliance with the MARPOL 7378 Annex 6. Secondly, because it's essential for gathering evidence used in disputes relating to poor bunker quality, engine damage, and for proper pre-treatment of bunker fuels. Immediately before completion of bunkering, stop sampling and remove the primary sample cubetainer in the presence of representatives from the supplier and the ship. In the following, we will explain the subsequent sampling process. Shake the primary sample thoroughly, then divide it into several sample bottles. These are retained or official samples, one each for the supplier and the ship, and one as proof of sulfur content as required by MARPOL 7378 Annex 6. A final sample may be required under local regulations, such as SS 600. Also prepare a private sample if necessary. The chief engineer and the supplier sign each sample label after confirming its accuracy. Affix to each bottle an official label marked with an identification number and symbol. The retained sample must be kept on board for at least 90 days following complete consumption of the bunker fuel. It will be used as evidence if doubts arise about the fuel's characteristics. In compliance with MARPOL 7378 Annex 6, another sample must be retained as proof of sulfur content for at least 12 months following the date of bunker delivery. Samples must be kept in safe, cool places away from direct sunlight. They should not be kept in living quarters. The BDN must be retained for 3 years from the date of bunkering. You must always be ready to present the MARPOL sample history of the samples when required during inspections. Short quantity bunkers is a frequently encountered problem. A typical example of this problem is cappuccino bunker, or fraudulent under-delivery of bunker fuel, wherein air or chemicals are injected into the fuel, causing it to foam and artificially increase its volume. A crew that has received cappuccino bunkers will discover the under-delivery only after the bubbles have disappeared. To prevent cappuccino bunkers, make it a habit to bring the supplier's attention to this problem during the pre-bunkering meeting. Then uncover the barge's access opening to visually confirm that bubbles are not being generated in the bunker fuel tank. And check that bubbles are not found on the tape during sounding. Do not disconnect the hose until you have confirmed that the oil surface level has stabilized. Great care should always be taken to prevent oil spills. That said, they do happen, so your vessel and crew must be familiar with the proper equipment and countermeasure to handle oil spills. If oil has leaked onto the sea surface, an oil fence is deployed to prevent the spill from spreading. An oil fence has floats and physically surrounds the oil spill. If possible, lay out oil fences around the ship and the barge prior to bunkering. Following an oil spill, use an absorbent made of polypropylene or polyurethane that has oil-absorbing properties. It can be scattered over the surface of the spill to collect the spilled oil. An oil treatment agent, a mixture of surface active agent and solvent, is scattered over the oil for emulsification or diffusion and thus facilitates its natural attenuation. However, permission from the authorities concerned is required before an oil treatment agent can be used. Then a coagulating agent is scattered over the spillage and stirred together to solidify the oil rapidly so that it can be recovered. To prevent oil spills, it is vitally important that every member of the crew must recognize that marine pollution can severely damage the natural environment, as well as our daily lives. We would like you to perform bunkering operations with the keen awareness that oil spills can definitely be prevented by working carefully and faithfully to the fundamentals of safe bunkering we have outlined in this DVD.